You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, man, we are T-minus 2 days away from the draft. It doesn't seem real, but we are finally here.
Yep, all the posturing, the hypothesis, the film grinding, hypotheticals, it's all going to come to a screeching halt, and we're going to have to deal with the reality that is what the Broncos do in the NFL draft. And, at the same time, I feel like, you kind of get to this point and you're like, I'm ready for it to actually happen. But then you got to deal with May, June, July, which is just absolutely barren and horrible. And you're going to see me already starting to talk about 2020 picks because I'll get that itch again.
I know.
So, yeah, I'm ready for it, but at the same time, I know how it is after that, and not being a big NBA person and, liking baseball, not loving baseball. I'm football 365. Those months can be a little bit rough. So I guess I'll have to console myself with fishing, hiking, and disc golf.
There you go. Yeah, I've definitely gotten back into golf a lot more, although I did play with my in-laws this weekend, and hopefully they're not listening to this, but no, it took us 2.5 hours to play 5 holes.
Oh, goodness.
And it was grueling. It was fun because, I had my whole family out there and stuff. But, man, I'm not a patient person. So that kind of golf is a little bit too much. But, hey, it's golf. It's being out there in the fun weather. And I'm doing some soccer. It's finally that spring where we can get outside. And I told my daughter the other day, we were standing outside, I said, just face the sun and put your arms out and just soak it in, baby.
Vitamin D. Not too much, though.
Yeah. But loved it. But we're right there by the draft. And so we want to make sure, especially right here, right now, that you know where you can find us on Twitter, because we're going to be talking about the draft and everything that's connected to your Denver Broncos. And so you can find me at Carl Dumler MHH. You can also find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you just subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input on our show. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things that pertain to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, ladies and gentlemen, since we are this close to the draft, we kind of thought we would take a little bit of time and do a look at our top 50 big board and just kind of see. Nick and I both wrote these without seeing the others. And so this is actually, this isn't us just going through saying, oh, yeah, I agree, that player right there. This is us. So you're going to see some disagreements. There's some players that we have quite a few picks apart. But, hey, that's the genius and the subjectiveness of the draft, and it's an exciting time with that. But we thought we'd go through our big board and just kind of talk about some of these prospects, and we'll start here with the top 10. And I guess here's my one question before we start. Did you write your big board geared towards the Broncos or just big board in general?
Always geared toward the Broncos, since we're writing for the Broncos and not specifically the draft. So I do that, and that means quarterbacks raised a little bit, but position like edge rusher and right tackle specifically are ones that I have dropped because of that, because, Juwan James, and even left tackle too. I'm not giving up on Bulls yet this season. So, yeah, definitely towards the Broncos rather than in a vacuum.
Okay. See, I did the opposite. I went just general, I guess.
I could tell.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would have had some of the quarterbacks especially ranked a little bit higher. So we'll get into some of that discussion here in a little bit. But let's just start here at the top, because we agree on the first three, 1, 2, 3, perfect, lined up. Quinnen Williams, number 1. You're big. You've been hyping this guy since, what, October maybe?
October, September. The obvious talent is obvious. It's kind of nice to get credit for stuff like that, but at the same time, when you have guys wrecking dudes, double teams and whatnot, and flashing like he does, especially with a program like Alabama where it's high profile, get in line, right? Like, it's obvious talent is obvious.
Right. The odds of him falling to the Broncos are pretty much slim to none. But if he's there, please, Broncos, please run to the podium and just make sure that it's not a dream. But, I mean, he's perfect fit of what they need. They need that nose tackle. They need that guy that can get after the passer, guy that can stuff the run. He can do everything. I mean, is there really any huge weaknesses to his game other than just getting some experience and getting some more development in his hand usage and moves and things like that? I mean, that just comes with more experience, right?
See, and I would even argue that his hand usage is one of his best traits. I think the biggest thing for me is that he's not really an elite athlete. You don't see him out there running, jumping, testing kind of like Rashawn Gary did or even Ed Oliver did, but his balance and his bevy of pass rush moves and his strength of his hands, displacing guys, and just a variety of technique that he has with his hands or the pass rush moves that he has with his hands are all very high. So while he doesn't have the elite burst, that elite trait that Ed Oliver has, I think he's very well-rounded. And, the 1 year of tape adds there's a little bit of bust factor there because of that 1 year of tape. But, man, I think he's a versatile player, very nuanced, can win in a multitude of ways. And, my number one overall player in terms of the Denver Broncos big board. Now, if I did a big board on a vacuum, though, I don't think I'd have him number one. I'd have another player number one.
Really?
Yes. Just because versatility and edge rushing talent is king. And going back and looking at the sophomore tape, the rate of pressure, man, I got to go with edge rusher. As much as I love and pound the table for interior pass rush, edge pass rush is still king. Well, queen to the quarterback being king. But if it was in a vacuum, I would have had Nick Bosa number one and Quinnen Williams too. But because the Denver Broncos big board and Broncos really don't need edge, I have Quinnen Williams one.
Okay. Well, that takes us here to number 2, Nick Bosa. And, I mean, this is a guy that halfway through the season got hurt, decided even if he got healthy that he'd sit out the rest of the season because, I mean, it's NFL career. I mean, he knew he was going to be a top 5 pick. And it still amazes me how many people get after players for skipping bowl games or skipping part of the season because they want to get ready for the NFL. I mean, isn't college supposed to be getting you prepared for your career? And
it's gosh, that irritates me.
So I mean, if teams view that as a negative, I wouldn't be with them on that. To me, that just says that they're taking their career serious and they're making sure that they have everything possible ready for their big interviews. And I view it as a positive, honestly. I mean, I guess I don't view it either way. If they want to play in the bowl game, if they want to play out the season, that's great. I understand. I mean, you can talk about your boy TJ Hawkinson. I mean, he loved Iowa, and I think it was a really hard decision for him to leave that place early. And there's been a lot of players that they talk about. They love their university, and it's understandable. I loved my college time, and I always think of my buddies from college and all that kind of thing. But
hanging out in the a-hole.
Yeah.
It's a callback to the Dalton Risner interview if you guys are confused. So.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, but Nick Bosa, he's got himself ready for the NFL, and he's going to be I can't see how he's not a top 2 pick unless some teams get really, really stupid with the quarterbacks. Yeah,
that's the only way that I could see it happening. I have Quinnen Williams for the Broncos rated higher because they don't need edge. But, this is a callback to a conversation I had with Eric Trickle, who was, spouting some insider information that this is even while the season was going on. But if the Broncos were high enough to take Nick Bosa, they definitely would consider it, think about doing it, and figuring out how to make it work with Chubb, Vaughn, and Bosa. And when you have a guy who's versatile like he is, I mean, he would have been rated higher than Chubb last year. So you just find a way to make it work when you have an elite player like that. He's not going to fall to the Broncos at 10. No way in heck. If he falls to 3, I'll be shocked, let alone, 10. So really good player. There are some concerns, the injuries. History is a concern there. You don't know if that's going to be something that props up. Is he going to be, a super bendy elite athlete? It's a lot of questions, that was there with Joey Bosa too coming out. So I think he's a better athlete than Joey, not as good with his hands or as powerful, but I think bendier and more athletic. So he's a really special player, and I'm really glad. I mean, you never want the Broncos to lose to the Raiders, but if the Broncos would have beat the Raiders to end the season, we're talking about the Raiders probably taking Bosa at 2 overall, I believe. So, I'm really hoping that, he doesn't get to the Raiders. The Raiders don't trade up for him because I think he's probably got the best chance of being the best player out of this class.
Right. And so then that brings us to number 3 here. And a guy that you and I have hyped up on this show so many times, Ed Oliver. I mean, kind of I guess you can claim him as a defensive end, defensive tackle, nose tackle. Some teams even tested him out as linebacker. He's kind of one of those he's so elite athletically. Sometimes you almost don't even know where to play him. And, I mean, this guy just pops on tape, 5-star recruit, went to smaller school, and, I mean, it's easy to see. This guy was absolutely the best player on the field pretty much every single game that he played in college. It's just ridiculous what he showed on tape. Taking on triple teams, still making plays in the backfield, still that first step elite athleticism that he has. It's just off the charts. And I know you and I, if he was there at 10, we'd be jumping for joy if the Broncos took him. It doesn't sound like the Broncos are as high on him as we are, but again, I mean, this guy, it's hard to argue. If he went to a bigger school and did what he did, which I think in some senses he could have because he wouldn't have been triple teamed every single play, it would be hard to say that he wouldn't be the number one player in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, there are concerns about the size, 6'1", 270 pounds and short arm length. But even with his size, you put him with his athletic testing against other defensive tackles, he's an elite spark player, which puts in heavy weight for size. That's a big negative to his score in spark, and he's still an elite player. That's just how athletic he is. There's some question about how you're going to use him. He's not going to play a nose tackle in the NFL, maybe in some NASCAR kind of package things, but not really a nose tackle or one technique. But, 3 technique, 4, 5, maybe even some edge, maybe even some off-ball linebacker shooting up the A-gap and some weird different looks. That versatility, that athleticism is huge. Talking to some people, there's a chance that Ed Oliver might be the 3rd best linebacker in this class, off-ball linebacker. That's the type of athlete he is, and that's the huge gulf after the 2 Devons. So we're going to talk a little bit about some linebackers here coming up, but there's only 2 that are worthy of the top 50 in my opinion. And Ed Oliver, elite. The reason he goes number 3 here for me, we have the same 1, 2, 3 here, is because that interior pass rusher value trait is so good, and that twitch, I mean, it's special. So some people compare him to Aaron Donald. I don't think he's Aaron Donald. He doesn't have to play with the same level of power. But if you can get a Geno Atkins there, especially, putting him between Vaughn and Chubb, that's amazing. And following Oliver's, prospect profile so far, where his stock is at, coming into the year, number 1 overall pick, maybe with Bosa, then, has an okay season, but gets injured, doesn't play, kind of a little bit of Bosa stuff too, but not the severity of the injury. And people dock him for that. He has the jacket gate, which, to me is stupid, but, whatever. And then you see him kind of falling, is he going to fall to, the 20s? He's small, blah, blah, blah. Is he a linebacker? Blah, blah, blah. And now we're kind of see him, maybe, he's in play for the Broncos at 10, Bengals 11, Packers at 12. All those teams would love to get him. And now we're talking about him going 3 overall, even before Quinnen Williams, to the Jets. So it's just kind of stupid. You kind of see how this process is. But elite athletes who can get after the pass rusher, they're always going to be in high demand. You can never have enough of them. So Ed Oliver for me is why he is number 3 for me, and behind 2 other guys, all pass rushers above him.
Right. Well, then that brings us to our next guy, and here's another guy we've talked up on this show quite a bit, Devin White. We both have him as top 5 players. You have him at 4, I have him at 5. And, I mean, this guy is a missile ready to attack. Sometimes that missile doesn't quite fire in the right direction. He can get fooled a little bit here and there, so he's a little bit raw at times on the field, sometimes kind of trying to evaluate what's happening in front of him. But beyond that, I mean, elite athlete, guy that wants to hit people, guy that can cover, guy that can come down, make plays in the backfield. He can get off blocks. He can, I mean, everything that you want out of a off-ball linebacker. If you're talking about that 3-down kind of guy, and you're thinking about a guy that you think Vic Fangio can really turn into an all-pro kind of talent, maybe even Hall of Fame kind of talent. I mean, Devin White has all the pieces you want if you're a coach, that you can sit there and say, I can make this guy a star. Yeah,
I was reading Thor Nystrom's at Roto World's scouting report on linebackers, and he said something that really stuck out to me. But Devin White, he's a 5-tool linebacking prospect. You got man coverage ability, you got zone coverage ability, you got in the box ability, you got sideline to sideline ability, and you got blitzing ability. And that's something that I think he has over even Devin Bush in this class and even Roquan Smith last year. So, yeah, Devin White, my 4th overall player, your 5th overall player, and a true blue chip player. There are some questions about the processing ability, the ability to get off blocks. His tackling sometimes can be a little bit high, but he takes the ball away. He's a leader. He's an absolute missile. And to me, he's linebacker 1 and a true blue chip player in this class that if he's there at 10, I think the Broncos probably jump at him.
Well, then that brings us to another pass rusher here in Josh Allen of Kentucky. And I have him at 4. You have him at 8. I kind of put him at 4 mostly because, again, just overall ranking instead of just what's good for the Broncos. So we had a little bit of miscommunication, I guess, in what we were supposed to be doing with some of this. But I mean, that's still fine. I mean, it just shows, again, the kind of talent that this guy is. He is one that, I mean, has really refined his talent as a pass rusher coming into this last season where, I mean, he's kind of more of an off-ball kind of guy. Now he's moved down to getting after the quarterback. And he makes me think, and I always forget this guy's name, the one that was drafted by Arizona that you love so much.
Hassan Reddick.
Yeah, Hassan Reddick. Now,
he's done nothing.
Right, he's done nothing. So, I mean, maybe that's not a great comparison. But, again, just those kind of guys that have versatility to do a lot of things. And I know some Bronco fans are going to hate what Von Miller said here recently about how Vic Fangio's defense is going to have him dropping back into coverage more. But sometimes that ability to have a guy that can get after the quarterback but also drop back in coverage is a huge advantage where quarterbacks don't know if you're dropping back into that zone. That I always think of the Patriots when Von Miller got that interception in the playoffs. I mean, you just don't expect Von Miller to drop back into coverage like that. But that's exactly that spot where the Patriots love to attack, where they have that pass rusher come off, leaves that little bit of a hole, that little window, have their quick wide receivers do some great things, and boom, big play. Well, if you have a guy that can drop back in coverage a little bit, that makes that quarterback have to pause or risk a really bad play. So Josh Allen, very good player. Seems like he's probably going to go top 5 in this draft is what it's looking like because pass rushers are king. And he is, like I said, a very versatile player.
Yeah, no, you are correct there. And for me, the reason I have him even as high as 8, despite him being edge rusher, is that versatility. You know, I would love to see him actually as an off-ball linebacker. And then in pass rushing situations, you can get creative with Chubb and Vaughn and Allen. And Anthony Barr is kind of a comparison for me for him. But I think that versatility, sometimes you got to worry about is, would you rather have a guy who does one thing great or tries to do too many things and not do them as well? So there is some concern there, some bustability. But, after seeing Kyle Benoit do really well for the Patriots this past season and that versatility as a pass rusher and off-ball linebacker, I think he's one that I would be intrigued by. So even though, Bronco big board, Broncos don't really need edge rusher. If Josh Allen fell to them at 10, I really doubt he does. But if he fell to them at 10, he's a blue chip player to me, and that versatility means that I'd be okay going after him. And, you let a guy like Vic Fangio figure out what you're going to do there.
Right. Well, I think of Clay Matthews. And, I mean, they kind of had a situation where they didn't have any off-ball linebackers to play with. And so they moved him there. And he wasn't great at it, but he wasn't terrible either. And he actually helped out quite a bit in the run game, and then they could move him around. And like I said, when you have 3 guys that can get after the quarterback, if you add Josh Allen to the tape or to the table, you can move those 3 guys around and find those advantageous matchups that you can really get after the quarterback. So you can have one of these guys coming up the middle, 2 guys coming off the edge, and just kind of move them around a little bit. So, yeah, I wouldn't really mind it too much because, like you said, he's a great player. It's hard to argue taking great players, especially at a very prime position like that of pass rusher. That takes us then to our next player. And this is one you and I have talked about that we don't like the value at pick 10.
You gotta preface it though. We have players tied here. We might need to have some decisions, a little bit of debate there with these ties.
Okay.
We have a tied score. So how I did this is that I took your ranking and my ranking, added them together, divided by 2. And that's how we got that score. So the lower the score, the higher you're on the big board. So inevitably, especially with 2 people, you're going to end up with some ties. So we do have 2 players tied here.
Okay. So we have TJ Hawkinson, the tight end from Iowa, and Jonah Williams, the tackle or offensive lineman from Alabama. And I'm going to guess you're going to agree with this, but if those 2 are the players that we're debating between of who the Broncos take, I'm guessing you're saying Jonah Williams.
Oh, man, I don't know. They're like literally on the same tier for me when you saw my tiered big board. I think, man, I'm going to go with Hawkinson.
Are you? I would go Jonah Williams.
Look at the board. You got my rank right here. I got Hawkinson 10 and Jonah Williams 11.
That's true. That is true. You do have him a little higher. I have it reversed. I have Williams at 8 and Hawkinson at 9. So we got – I guess that's why they tied. No, I do have Jonah Williams higher just because, again, I love that versatility that he brings to the table. He brings a little bit of help in case Bowles doesn't pan out You got Jonah Williams, who you could plug in at that left tackle position. And I think I still view him as a tackle. But he is one of those guys you can move into guard, and I think he can be a star at guard as well. It's just kind of whatever you want to do with this guy. Wherever you need him, he can plug in and play. TJ Hawkinson, I like him. I really do. But there's just so many other tight ends in this draft that I like that I feel like the offensive line is going to dry up pretty quickly after about mid-second round.
Yeah.
Where tight end, you can still get guys in the 4th, 5th round.
Yeah, I just think for me, drafting this high, I don't think Jonah Williams is a blue chip player. Yeah, there's going to be guys later on that I like as much as him. Not as much, but like guys I think that are closer that you can get out value from him. But Hawkinson's two-way ability and scheme fits, I think there's just more impact in his ability. So that's why I went with him, but that goes in the face of positional value. So again, neck and neck for me. I wouldn't have an issue with either of them. Preferably, honestly, trade back at 10 instead of pick one of those guys. But, that's just kind of how you're picking 10. You're not picking 5 overall like last year. So you got to deal with how the board falls. But we got Hawkinson and Jonah Williams tied for 6 overall.
Well, then our next guy here, and this is one that we have pretty big difference in where we're at, and that is Brian Burns, the edge rusher from Florida State. And this is a guy, I really like his bend over the edge. There's some that would actually debate whether he is the top pass rusher in this draft. But I mean, again, I just love what he brings to the table because I think he's a perfect fit in the 3-4. And it would just be hard for me to, if he's there at 10, I guess I would pass on him depending on who else is there. But I do really like his game. You have him at 15. And then we have a tie here. Sorry, I forgot to say that we do have another tie. And we have a tie with Drew Lock. Now, this is, again, where some of my difference in thought process going into this. I have Drew Lock ranked 17th. I do have him as my highest rated quarterback. You have him as your 5th. And so that brings us Brian Burns, Drew Lock tied. So we both at least have him as our top quarterback. I think that says something of our thoughts on his fit with the Broncos.
Yeah, no, Drew Lock, to me, he's the best fit of this class for if they do want to run that Shanahan West Coast offense. You don't have to have that athleticism to run that boot. You do have to run the boot, but it doesn't have to be, Jay Cutler out there or anybody like that. But I think Lock is a, prototype for that. You can get away with a Flacco type. You can get away with a Matt Ryan type, Jimmy Garoppolo. But I would rather have the arm talent to take shots and be a little bit more explosive in that offense than nickel and diming it down the field. So I have Drew Lock 5 overall on my board. After those, right after Devin White, Ed Oliver, Nick Bosa, and Quinton Williams. Those are my blue chip players for the Broncos specifically. So Lock is the highest, best fit quarterback, highest ceiling quarterback in my opinion in this class. So I got him at 5, and yeah, I'm glad we could see a tier difference here between him and the other two as it pertains to the Denver Broncos.
And then that brings us then to the other. This is our last guy in the top 10, and that's Noah Fant. I mean, another tight end from Iowa, the blesses of riches there in Iowa at the tight end position. I don't think you're going to find too many other times in history that you're going to see a team with the top 2 tight ends in all of college football. But you have him at 13, I have him at 10. And I mean, again, just you're looking at that athleticism. You're looking at a guy that is a complete mismatch on the field. The only thing you could say a little bit is that he's not quite the blocker that Hawkinson is. He's going to be more of your slot tight end type that you're going to really have him testing the seams and kind of being your athletic guy. But again, if you're talking about wanting to add a weapon to the offense, Noah Fant, it's going to be hard to find anybody that's going to be a bigger weapon than him in this draft.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I think that, his athleticism, his ability to stretch the seam and, complemented with a more inline guy, he could be pretty special. There are some questions about, his ability to get off that line, sometimes a little bit slow to react to the snap. The blocking's not elite. The contested catch ability, the yards after catch ability, those aren't as good as Hawkinson. There's a reason Hawkinson is rated higher, but, when you have and especially in a class like this where, the wide receivers at the top, day 2 talent, between 20 to 80, there's going to be a lot of good wide receivers that come off the board. But at top 10, that's not this year. That's next year. We'll talk. So as soon as I'm already ready to talk 2020, Carl. No, but this year, no, not the case. So you got tight ends being pushed up a little higher. So I wouldn't love Noah Fant at 10 overall, despite we have him at 10 here. luckily for the Broncos, edge rushers will be going before that, although we do have 2 edge rushers in the top 10. So, but yeah, no, I like Noah Fant. I don't love him for the Broncos, but if they get him, man, he'd be a really fun weapon for Flacco and would really help the red zone offense out a lot, because he is just his efficiency in the red zone for the Iowa Hawkeye offense was incredible. And at bringing in Scangarello, who does a good job, or at least the West Coast offense has done a good job scheming opening tight ends, and Flacco's usage of the tight end, you'd have a hard time hating that pick. Besides, the positional value, but even then, it's going to make the offense better. So, and the pass game specifically, which, man, we really need that.
Well, one question before we take a quick break here, but any big surprises here in the top 10 for you?
I guess I am surprised that Brian Burns made the top 10 for us. But again, if you're general overall big board, there's a guy down here later that maybe I have him lower. Again, this is a big thing for me, so we'll talk about it here coming up. But Brian Burns, the Broncos, I have him, despite the Broncos being okay at edge. I have him at 15. You have him at 7. But to me, he's a guy who actually can fit the scheme still, more of that Leonard Floyd type, where you're going to be able to do some coverage with Chubb more hand in the dirt, and Vaughn that everything elite pass rusher. So if you can have 3 guys with that talent, you can get away with it. And it's maybe not the best resource allocation, but again, getting after the pass rusher is the name of the game if you don't have the quarterback. And getting a guy like Brian Burns who fits the scheme, complements Chubb very well, can prepare you for life after Von Miller, as scary as that sounds, or options there. That's something that you should look into if it's hitting you in the face, because I think the talent level is there to be a top 10 player, just not top 10 on the Broncos big board specifically.
And with that, we're going to take a quick break before we get into our next group of players.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And welcome back. And we're going to take a look here now at our picks number 11 through 25 for our big board. And this is where you're going to see maybe a couple more quarterbacks come into the picture. And we might actually finally have a cornerback make our list, which is interesting. But it just kind of shows, again, where the talent is of this draft. But let's start here. We got 3 players tied for 11th on our board. And we have Dwayne Haskins, Kyler Murray, and Christian Wilkins. And again, you have quarterbacks ranked 5, 6, 7. I had them ranked 17th, 18th, 19th. And we had a little bit of disagreement. I have Kyler Murray as my second quarterback, Dwayne Haskins as my third. You have Dwayne Haskins as number 2, Kyler Murray as your third quarterback. What separates those 2 quarterbacks for you?
For me, Kyler Murray is just a little bit concerning with the size, the ability to bolt for football or for baseball at any moment. And, he's also really unrealistic in the realm of the Broncos picking him. So I just feel more comfortable with Haskins or Locke there. And especially with Elway. Again, Elway saying, pretty much painting a picture saying there's no way he's taking a quarterback that size. So pushing him down the board a little bit there for me. Okay.
Did you see his Wonderlic score come out? Does that scare you at all?
No, it does not. There's a difference between, that Wonderlic for me, unless you're absolutely just god awful, then it's a concern. But you get way more talking to the coaches, seeing what they do on the whiteboard and bringing them in than you ever would from a Wonderlic test, which there's no real statistical correlation to it being good. I actually think there's a negative correlation with it between like tight ends or something, or a couple positions. So it's dumb. They should honestly just get rid of it.
I'm with you there. And so then that brings us to Christian Wilkins, and you have him 12th, I have him 13th. And I think it boils down to 2 things for me with him: leadership and just perfect fit. I think he's a great fit in our scheme. I don't think he's ever going to be that elite talent, but I think he's one of those guys you can consistently trust day in and day out to be a hard worker. He's going to do exactly what the coaches want him to do. And I think he's just going to be perfect in that locker room. I mean, I really do think he could develop into a captain type player for this team. Even if he's not the best player on the team, he is one of those guys that others really look to. And so it's hard to ignore the fact that the Broncos took a lot of captains last year, and boom, looks like they have a pretty good draft on their hands. So looking for those kind of types again, we have Christian Wilkins, who was the captain of that Clemson defense, who had a lot of blue chip kind of players on it. And I mean, it's hard to really complain about much other than this guy's just not going to be that elite kind of guy. He's not the most elite athlete. He's not the strongest guy. He's not the fastest guy, but he's pretty good at everything.
Yeah, no, to me, he's a complimentary interior pass rusher. And if you're asking him to be your best pass rusher, you're going to have trouble. But coming into Denver with the versatility he has, the character he has, I mean, this dude's a culture fit all the way and really can be moved around a little bit. I think he's a good fit for him. And I know the Broncos did a fair amount of work on him as well. So if they trade down and Christian Wilkins is there, let's say around 15, we have him, we had all Murray, Haskins, and Wilkins tied for 11 with a score of 12.5. But if the Broncos aren't looking quarterback early and they trade down to 15 and Wilkins is there, I'd have no issue with it. I don't think it has the highest ceiling, but I think that, you're going to get a really good contributor for a long time, that his impact will be felt beyond what he does on the football field.
And then this brings us to a player that we know the Broncos are very high on and that very much could be in play there at pick number 10, and that is Devin Bush. I had him as my 20th ranked player. You had him as your 9th. So a little bit of difference there, obviously. But, I mean, I guess for me, it's a little bit of I like the player, I don't love the player. And everything in his game seems to be a notch below that of Devin White. And at pick 10, I just don't see that guy that I think is going to turn into this all-star player for the Broncos. Even with the coaching staff that's known for taking off-ball linebackers and turning them into something, it's just hard for me with Bush. I just don't quite see it. There's something that's missing there for me.
Yeah, for me, I think that he doesn't play with the ability in the box that White has. He's not as powerful when he's engaging with blockers, and he's not as good in zone coverage right now. But I think he's better in man coverage. He's got better instincts in reading his keys right now. So he's just underneath White for me, but not by a lot. There's a big discrepancy here on our boards. You have him at 20th overall. I have him at 9. So I'm definitely a bigger fan of Devin Bush than you are. And, to me, he reminds me a lot of Deion Jones coming out. Good athlete, a little bit undersized. He's going to have to work and use that athleticism and instincts to beat blockers because, and people, they measured about the same, White and Bush, that is. But White definitely looks like he carries that weight bigger. He just looks bigger on tape than Bush does. But I think he can do it, and you're going to have that defensive line to help him out a little bit in that regard. But given his athleticism, his blitzing ability, the sideline-to-sideline ability, and coverage, specifically man early on, I think the zone, he has to do some work in zone yet, but I think he can get there. I think he could be really good. So I'm much higher on him than you are, apparently.
Just a little bit. Like I said, I like him. I really do. And if the Broncos took him, I would very much understand why. And I would feel good about, the coaching staff and their ability to work with linebackers. I'd feel good about that. And I do think he is a great leader on the field, a very good field general of getting everybody in position. He's athletic. He's got all the things you're kind of looking for other than just the kind of height, weight, for off-ball linebacker that you're wanting there. But beyond that, again, a lot to like about his game. For a 10th overall pick, it just feels like a little bit of a letdown for me. It'll depend a little bit of who else is there. Let's say Drew Lock and Devin Bush are both there, and they take Devin Bush. I am not going to be happy about that kind of decision.
Yeah, it would scream Vic Fangio getting what he wants, which I can't feel too upset about, but it would feel a little bit of a short-sighted pick in the grand scheme of things. But we'll see. A lot of things can change. But I think that it's very much, Ben Albright's making it known via his Twitter, whether it, we want to call it encrypted or not, but he's, not beating around the bush for the Broncos at pick 10. So I think it's very much in play, and you got to talk about that Vic Fangio, Jim Harbaugh connection probably having some weight there as well. So I have him at 9 overall on my big board. I'd rather trade back than take him at 10 personally, but I'd have no issue. I'd not have a big issue. It'd be, a shrug. I can take it B+ level pick if they took him at 10 for me.
Right. Yeah. And now we have our first real true interior offensive lineman coming into the board, Garrett Bradbury, center for NC State. And this is one of those guys, if we trade back, I'm pounding the table saying, get this guy, please get this guy. Because, again, he's one of those players. There's so few weaknesses to his game.
Size again. That's about it. Him and Bush.
Yeah. But even there, we're playing the zone scheme, so getting those big, powerful kind of guys is not exactly the number one top priority. Getting guys that can move, guys that can really get to that second level, and he's great at those kind of things. And it allows – I think you and I would agree that Connor McGovern is a better right guard than he is a center.
He was last year.
Yeah. And so then getting a guy like Bradbury to plug in at that center position, who I think is this might upset some Bronco fans, but I think he's an upgrade to Paradis.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe not year one with the protection and everything, but like athleticism and the ability to reach some blocks. I mean, there's no way higher upside. Like, this is really good athletic upside.
Right, exactly. And so he's a plug and play starter day one for the Broncos. If you're trading back, I really do think offensive line becomes a huge look for the Broncos, because in those picks 15 through about probably 41, since we're at 41, offensive line is going to be king. There's a lot of guys that fall into that kind of category. Yeah. And I mean, even our next two guys here, we have tied for 16th overall, Andre Dillard and Juwan Taylor. And now I have Taylor a lot higher. And again, this just becomes because I'm not looking at it from the Broncos perspective. They don't need a right tackle, obviously, since they just spent a little bit of money on Juwan James. But Juwan Taylor, I mean, again, just a very powerful player, great in the run game, shows up in the pass game. Andre Dillard, maybe the best pass blocking left tackle in this entire draft. He's definitely the most prepared. I think I saw something the other day that said it was a stat of how many true pass blocking snaps that they've each taken of the left tackles. And Andre Dillard was double any other player in this draft.
I would like to see the proportion that were 3-step drops versus 5 and 7, though.
It's true.
That air raid.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, I understand. And so, I mean, that's always going to be the big concern with him is how prepared for the NFL is he? Because he's not going to be playing in any kind of scheme that's close to what he just did there. Yeah. He's going to be asked to do a lot more things. Is it more the system that allows him to be as good as he was? I don't think that's the case. I think his feet are incredible. I think his ability to get into position and knock a guy off his spot, I think it's top notch. Again, it's just going to be more his development in the run game, because he was just not asked to do that hardly at all in college. And even there, a lot of times it was kind of the delayed handoff. And so he's still doing a pass blocking set to sell the pass, and then it's a run. Yeah. So that'll be a big concern. But I guess I'll take Bradbury out of this equation. What scenario would you be okay taking Andre Dillard or Juwan Taylor for the Broncos?
Juwan Taylor for me is, since he's a pure right tackle, in my opinion, not having Brandon Thorne on here saying that he doesn't have the hands to really be moved inside or the leverage. I think he's a pure right tackle. So, I mean, look at my board. I got him at 26 overall. So late first round for me to take Taylor and then probably try him at guard, I guess, year one, although I don't love that fit. Dillard, again, they're not moving Bowles to guard. He's not great with his hands, and he's not super powerful. So why are you going to move him to a spot where those issues are going to be propagated even more so? You know, that's just dumb. So that doesn't make sense to me. And then, you're taking Dillard. You want your first round pick to play year one, especially if they're able bodied. So, but he's a really good fit for the pass scheme, and Garrett Bowles is, I would say, far less of a sure thing going forward at left tackle than Juwan James is at right tackle. So I have, let me see, Dillard here at 21 overall. If they traded back to 15 to, let's say, 18, 19, and he was there, I wouldn't have an issue taking him because the high value of that left tackle spot. However, that would probably spell the end of Garrett Bowles.
Do you think they'd be trading him at that point?
Man, I'd probably not. You'd probably just write him out as the swing tackle.
I mean, he is a cheap option, so it's not like you're paying big bucks for him.
Yeah, unless somebody offered a day 2 pick.
Right. And then it brings us to our next pick, and this is a guy we've talked a lot about on this podcast and even in our mock draft that we did, because we took him in the second round, and that's Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle. And I have him as 15th, you have him as 19th, and it's one of those things, especially if we trade back and get those extra picks. This kind of player being added even as a late first round, mid first round kind of guy, when you have that extra ammunition, makes a ton of sense for the Broncos. I mean, it really does, because you need this kind of player. Again, when we have 3 guys, our 3 starters on the defensive line that are coming up on contract after this season, adding a guy like Jeffrey Simmons that you can plug and play next year or even at the end of this first year, possibly. I mean, it just, oh man, that would be a huge, huge get for the Broncos.
Yeah, no, I agree. I absolutely love Jeffrey Simmons. If he had not gotten hurt, he would have been my number 2 overall player for the Broncos on this board. because I think he has Ndamukong Suh, Fletcher Cox level ability, and I think he's super versatile. So he would have been over Nick Bosa, not in a vacuum, but for the Broncos, he would have been over Nick Bosa, and he would have been over Ed Oliver. So, man, it's unfortunate that ACL injury happened, but if the Broncos trade down and you're okay, punting a year, I mean, it's essentially getting a top 5 pick next year. Like, that's the level of talent he is. So I'm okay doing that. I can be patient. Next year's schedule is a kick in the butt. The Chiefs are still going to be good. The Chargers are going to be good. It'd be good to get back to the playoffs, but you know what? Like, if you're painting your hopes the Broncos are making the playoffs next year, I think you probably have a less than a 50-50 chance of ending up happy. So in that regard, it's about building towards the future and getting the best players possible. So I wouldn't have any issue with it because I absolutely love his game.
Just a quick question. I know this isn't our big board, but the Chiefs just made one of the bigger trades of the year. What do you think of that trade getting Frank Clark? Because, I mean, we're talking about freak athletes or freak guys on the edge, and Jeffrey Simmons. I don't know. Some of their play just kind of makes me think of the same because they have those heavy hands. They like to really knock people around. What do you think of that trade for the Chiefs?
I see a lot of people dogging him, but for me, I think Dee Ford was being overrated due to production. And, he had probably one of the best opportunities in football last year with Chris Jones wrecking the inside and the Chiefs constantly playing with a lead. But Ford has been injured. He played last year at like 220, 225, and they're going to have to pay him as a non-scheme fit. So I think Frank Clark is a much better player. I think he's younger, he's much healthier, and he's a great scheme fit and probably one of the best 10 edge rushers in football right now. A lot of people don't know him, but I mean, he was really good last year and he got paid like it. So if it's a first round pick plus Dee Ford for Frank Clark, I don't mind it. Like you're picking, what are they picking? 29 overall. Frank Clark is going to be so much better than any player you're taking at 29 overall. I mean, as much as, Clelin Ferrell's a solid player, he'd probably go around 20 to 29. Frank Clark is definitely better year 1, year 2, which you're trying to take advantage of the Mahomes window, and also better than any cornerback you're probably going to get down there either. So, it's that plus the big contract, and Frank Clark doesn't have the best history, but I don't mind it from the Chiefs. I don't think he's a good scheme fit, and me, I'm all about getting pass rushers, and I think you have a big drop off after the first 4 edge rushers in this class. So I don't have an issue with it.
Good thoughts. I mean, it cost a lot, but they are in that win now window.
And they also have the best deal in football with Patrick Mahomes on his rookie contract.
Yep.
Money doesn't matter. Like, it's made up for them at this point. It's not going to be an issue. Paying Tyreek Hill, they have the money to do it, guys. Paying Chris Jones, guess what? They have the money to do it, guys. They can control Patrick Mahomes for 4 more years. They have 2 more years on his contract, the 5th year option, and then a franchise tag if they have to. People are like, oh, it's only 4 years. Broncos have won a Super Bowl less than 4 years ago. Peyton Manning's entire career in Denver was 4 years. 4 years is a long time. So I don't have an issue with it. I think that's stupid.
I mean, and you look again, picking at 29, most likely, one, the player's not going to probably live up to what Frank Clark is doing.
No way. Yeah, that's really long odds.
Right. And 2, the odds of them performing in the next 3-4 years at that, I mean, it's going to be a growing process. So you're not going to reap the rewards until maybe year 2, 3 of that contract anyway, which at that point you're about to have to pay Mahomes anyway. So it's kind of like what the Rams did last year. They saw, hey, we got a really great window right now to win a Super Bowl. And so they were trading picks like they were nothing to go get players that they thought were going to add talent to their team. And hey, they got to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they were close.
Are we really going to argue too much with that? I mean, yeah, they blew it in the Super Bowl, but I mean, they saw their window and tried to take advantage of it. Chiefs see their window. It's kind of like the Raiders when they were with Carr on his rookie contract and Mack on his rookie contract. And I mean, they were spending some money on trying to get some other players in there, and they had their one winning season. Unfortunately for them, Carr went down with injury and things like that. But I mean, teams realize everything is built in a window.
Yep.
Yes, when you have a franchise quarterback, that window's kind of expanded. But you look at Green Bay right now. What have they done with Rodgers since their one Super Bowl win?
I think they did go to an NFC Championship a couple times, but not
right. But I mean, it
Rodgers,
is right. I mean, it's tough. It's tough once they get paid to continue to build a championship window team. But getting back to our actual conversation here, we got Rashawn Gary, and this is I don't even know how to describe this player. Because
Boom or bust.
He really is. I mean, because he could be a top 5 player in this draft easily, because, I mean, athletically speaking, he's a freak. But you watch the tape and you're sitting there going, where is he? What's he doing? You just don't see the tape lining up with the athleticism. So either he hasn't been able to reach that potential, or he's just never going to reach that potential that he should.
I'm worried he's a Robert Kimdichie of this class. You know, a lot of profile, pop, and circumstance coming into the program. I think the number 1 overall D-line recruit, flashes athleticism, test out of the gym, but just not a football player. So we'll see. I have him at 17. You have him at 21. But personally, if he's my best player on the board, I'm really hoping to trade down. Actually, I have other defensive linemen that I think would be there ahead of him. That we're going to have to talk about this when we get to it, when we come up to him. But yeah, no, he concerns me greatly. But I do like the upside, the athleticism, and the versatility. You know, he can play some heavy edge, he can play some 3 technique, he can play 5 technique. So there's some intrigue there. It comes down to Rashawn Gary, the person, which I cannot speak to. So, and also I think he was flagged after I made my big board, but this came out today or yesterday that he was dinged for a shoulder injury that might need surgery next season. Not this, he can play through it this year, but might need surgery. So definitely something to watch there.
Right. And so then that brings us to another pass rusher here, Montez Sweat. And you and I have, it's a decent difference in our rankings of him. I have him at 12, you have him at 28. And I guess I'll just start with you. What are your thoughts? Why do you have him so low?
He just really is not a scheme fit for me for the Broncos. He is a pure 4-3 edge rusher. And if you want to have those edge rushers in base that can play out in space and play some coverage, that's not him. You know, that's not his game. Add to it the heart condition and everything. I'd have him probably about 12 to 16 on my big board if it was in a vacuum. But for the Broncos, team that's pretty much set at edge, and he doesn't really fit the scheme or complement them well as far as what they want. It doesn't make any sense to me to take him, so I have him much lower.
Okay. And like I said, mine was more in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So I have him a little bit higher because, I mean, again, athletically testing, he could be a top 5 player in this draft.
Yeah.
He hasn't always shown it.
The 2 players that are hurt the most in this in this big board for me because of the Broncos, specifically because of the Broncos, are Jawan Taylor and Montez Sweat, because neither of them makes sense to me with how the roster is currently constructed.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so now we have 2 players tied for 21st, and Jerry Tillery, I have him at 27, you have him at 14, and Byron Murphy III, I have him at 23, you have him at 18. So we have our first cornerback finally show up on the board. We both agree he's our top cornerback in this draft. And I mean, both these players, again, if the Broncos trade back, I would have no problem with them taking either of these players. I mean, Jerry Tillery is a great fit for the Broncos. Again, they're going to need defensive line depth this year and starter next year. He's a guy that I think is just starting to figure some things out. You look at his last couple years before this last season, and you kind of go on a guy that's really, really inconsistent. That didn't show up as much this last year. He had some real big-time moments. I mean, he was still a little bit streaky. But beyond that, he still had some great moments. He had some games where he just absolutely dominated. And again, just would be a great fit between Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. And then Byron Murphy, I mean, just this cornerback class isn't great. But if you trade back and you get a guy like him, it really gives you a lot of options in that secondary of what you want to do. Very aggressive player for his size. Can stick on a guy's shoulder. He can play man coverage. He can drop back in zone. He can do a lot of things that you're going to like at that cornerback position. I mean, either of these guys, what would keep you from taking them?
For me, Byron Murphy would keep me from taking him would be if you are planning on using a lot of press technique, even in zone. Byron Murphy is not a press cornerback. He's off ball. So if you want to looking for a guy to be physical at the line of scrimmage, that's not him. I would not put him in that role. And Jerry Tillery, I guess it would come off to his personality, you know, if that checks out, and that torn labrum, which he suffered, I believe. It was after the Stanford game, and then his play dropped off dramatically. So those would be the 2 big things. But like you said, I got Tillery at 14. I really love his fit in this defense. And I got Byron Murphy at 18. So I like both of these guys a lot.
And now we finally have our first wide receiver. I mean, again, just kind of shows the positions and how, one, what the Broncos need, and also just positions of value in this draft. But DK Metcalf, and I have him at 23, you have him at 20. And I mean, if we're looking for that guy that can run that 9 route, he is very good at that 9 route. I can't fault him for that. That was pretty much, he was asked to run that, run some comebacks. He wasn't asked to run a whole lot of things. He is a little bit of a project wide receiver. But again, I mean, a guy that just athletically tested out of the gym on some things, other things he didn't very well. I worry about his ability to handle an entire route tree. But again, if you're looking for a guy with that kind of height, weight, speed to add to that kind of offense, to make defenses have to respect that deep ball, DK Metcalf is a guy that you really got to look at in this draft.
Yeah, you know who else didn't run a fantastic route tree or wasn't asked to do it so much? Randy Moss. When you can run that athletically, and he beats press really well, but when you're that height, weight, speed, and can get down the field like he does, it's such an elite trait. It's a trump card, so to speak, that it doesn't bother me as much. I would have him higher if we didn't already have Cortland Sutton, because Sutton is just such a prototypical X. But I got DK Metcalf, my wide receiver 1, been there, going to stay there. And if you're looking for a team needs an X that can play down the field and make some big things happen and give you space all across the offense because they have to pay attention to him, he's the guy.
And then tied with him, we have Cody Ford, offensive lineman. We both have him ranked 22nd.
Yeah, wow. We have a couple guys coming up here that are ranked the same.
Oh man, here we go.
Yeah, I like Cody Ford a fair amount. I thought you would be higher on him than I am, but I think his zone fit. Maybe he's not the best, but I think he can play either scheme well, and I love that versatility. Left guard, right tackle. I think he can be fine there, and he's mean, so I like him a fair amount.
As much as I know we're going to a lot more zone scheme, I still love those guys that just want to go out there and just destroy a man's psyche.
I mean, you got to do that in zone too.
Right. Oh, I agree. I mean, he's not the perfect fit, like you said, but again, just a guy that can really go out there, move a pile, move people. I mean, he's one of my favorite players. And yeah, probably for the Broncos, I would have him ranked a lot higher because of that versatility to play inside, to have the heavy hands, to handle some of ththose bigger guys on the interior, but also be able to handle some speed on the edge if you needed him to. But again, just that scheme fit is a little bit of a drawback from him. And I don't know. But if the Broncos trade back and get him, I'm pretty happy with what they're going to do and how they can plug and play him somewhere in that offensive line. And I'm having him be my first guy come off the bus. That's for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, and we're going to come with our final guy in the top 25, and I have him at 25, you have him at 23, DeAndre Baker. And this is a guy that the new Colorado coach, used to be the defense coordinator for Georgia, has absolutely hyped up to the Broncos. Mel Tucker. Yep. He loves himself some Baker. Now, there's some reports out there that he is not as well liked by others, that he's not the most team-friendly kind of guy. But when you're talking about scheme fit with what the Broncos are going to try to do in that secondary, when you're talking about a guy that can come up and play press coverage and a guy that has a ton of college production, it's hard to say that DeAndre Baker isn't the best cornerback in this draft. I mean, what is it, like 2.5 years he hasn't given up a touchdown or something like that? It's been crazy, but I mean, that's partially scheme, but he's very physical, and I like him in this cover 2 scheme, and apparently the Broncos are very high on him as well. So he's my cornerback 2, your cornerback 2 as well. All right, well, we still have to go through the next 25 on our board. We're going to definitely lightning round it much quicker, but we're going to take a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And we are back to talk about the next 25 guys, not in depth, but starting here, a wide receiver that I can't believe I have him rated higher than you, and N'Keal Harry, Arizona State. It just comes down to he's not exactly like Cortland Sutton, but he has enough similarities that it drives him down just a little bit down my board. But I mean, I love the receiver. I have him as my number 2 ranked receiver on this board. It's hard for me to justify taking him unless it's there in that second round pick. Yeah, there are some issues about him getting off the line of scrimmage, getting off press, and his route tree. So definitely a concern there. That's why we have him down here. But I think he could be a really good wide receiver and definitely give the Broncos some height going forward. Next up, 27 overall, we have Chris Lindstrom, who, man, he's a good player. I think a really good scheme fit. I am surprised that you had him as high as you did, to be completely honest. We're pretty close, but there's another player that we have that we're coming up here that I'm surprised you didn't have higher, but you had him, Chris Lindstrom, 26. I had him 30, and if he's there at pick 41, I would be doing backflips. I'd be very excited to have him because I think he's a great scheme fit and really could give the Broncos something they need inside.
Yeah, he's definitely the top guy on my second round pick or trade back in the first, either way. But perfect fit, guy that has very few weaknesses to his game. I just love him there. Chris Lindstrom, man, plug him in there at the right guard spot, and I think you have your guy for the next 10 years.
Yeah, no, he's definitely intriguing. I think he'll probably go with one of the first 3 picks in the second round, unfortunately, but we'll see. Moving on now, we got the third cornerback off the board here, many people's number 1, and if the Broncos were staying in that Wade Phillips style type of defense where it's much more press man, I'd be higher on him. Greedy Williams, I have him at 27, you have him at 33. Worth a first-round pick, but with that tackling ability, some zone recognition questions, not as high as Baker or Murphy for me.
Yeah, you watch him in coverage, and there's nobody that can be more sticky, and you look at the size as well, being 6'2". You get some of those big, fast wide receivers that you're seeing in the NFL today. Greedy Williams is one of those guys that can go out there and shut them down. But there's so many weaknesses to his game, so many questions about his character. I really hope the Broncos don't take him. As much as I have him, I have him 33rd best player in this draft, but I still wouldn't want to take him.
He reminds me a lot of Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie in that he is just not really making way too many business decisions and not tackling. And I need that guy to bring some physicality. So that's just me.
Yep.
Moving on now, 29 overall, Dalton Reisner from Kansas State, offensive line across the board. I have him at 24, and you have him at 37. Carl, I'm really upset with you. 37.
Please don't listen to this, Reisner. I love the kid. I really do. He is my number 2 pick that I would have there at the second round if the Broncos could absolutely get him. He's one of those guys I'm willing to trade up to either end of round 1 or beginning of round 2 to go get. I love this kid. I love his fit with the Broncos. I love his versatility. There's not much I don't love about this kid. I guess I don't know why I have him this low, because now I'm looking at my list and I'm kind of going, okay, yeah, I'd probably take him over him. I'd honestly take him over N'Keal Harry, and I actually have him ranked lower on this. So, probably looking back, I would put him a little bit higher. Maybe it was just one of those that kind of forgot about him until I got at that point in my draft, and I'm like, oh, okay, yep, I better put him on this list.
Rude. I know. What a good interview, and you're just insulting him like that.
I know. Oh, man, I'm so sorry, man.
We're going to both put you in the a-hole now. Now, I have him 24 and just below Cody Ford, but I'm in on Reisner. Now, 30th overall, for both of us, he was ranked 31. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, versatile player, safety / nickelback, and I love his versatility. And I think one thing that he brings that maybe some other guys don't bring at that safety position, being the versatile one, is that I can see him being very good as a single high as well.
Yeah, I like what he can bring to the field. It's one of those, as a defense coordinator, you love getting players like this that you can really get creative with.
Yeah.
And I mixed with Justin Simmons, who has a lot of creativity to his game as well.
Kareem Jackson.
Yep. You got all 3 of those guys. You can do a lot of things coverage-wise that you couldn't do in years past.
Yeah, I can't disagree. All right, well, going to start giving them out in chunks now. We got tied for 31st overall, Hakeem Butler, wide receiver, Iowa State, and Clelin Ferrell, edge rusher from Clemson. Then we got the injured Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown from Oklahoma, teeny tiny but man explosive. 34, we have Nasir Adderley, safety / defensive back from Delaware. And then 35 overall, A.J. Brown, the other wide receiver from Ole Miss. Any of those guys stand out to you that you want to talk about?
I want to talk about Marquise Brown.
Okay.
Because I just watched him again this last week, and I think he's probably one of the most explosive wide receivers I've ever seen in the first 3 steps. His ability to get down the field and just get open in a hurry, not only get open deep, but get open in a hurry. I would absolutely love that with the Broncos. I think it would be a perfect fit for what they need. And I don't think he's ever going to be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, but for what he does it really, really well. And teams would absolutely have to respect everything that he brings to the table. What about you?
For me, Clelin Ferrell is ranked 49 on my board. He's 16 overall for you. just again, this comes down to being a horrible scheme fit for the Broncos. He's a pure pass rusher edge, not really super twitchy. If we were playing 4-3, I thought he would have been a good fit for the Chiefs now when they had a first, but for the Broncos doesn't make any sense for me. And I really like AJ Brown. He's more of a slot, but if you're kind of looking for the 11 personnel and again, a guy who's really good after the catch, really good hands, I think he does have some boundary ability as well. I think he's one that's, there's people are ranking him way too high early in the year, 5 overall, 10 overall, whatever. But now that he's an early second round pick, I think there's some value there. I think he's a player that I think can be a really good one. Maybe not the upside of DK Metcalf, maybe not even the upside of N'Keal Harry, but I feel pretty good about AJ Brown.
Yeah, good player right there. I've had some other people think that he's very overrated, but I actually like his game quite a bit.
It's like Ed Oliver to me. He a lot of hype coming in, and then overexposure, people kind of fall out of love with him. But coming back around, I think he's a good player. I think he's a really good player, and the fact that he has some ability from Z or slot and yak ability, I like his fit for the Broncos. And if they took him in the second round, I'd be excited about the offense and the playmakers that they're getting. They would maybe need a little bit more speed, but man, he has some fun size options there because he's almost like a tight end. He's a thick dude, so fun player there. Moving on now, 36 through 40, we got Juwan Thornhill. I have him at 32. You have him at 43. Debo Samuel. I have him at 35. You have him at 41. Eric McCoy from Texas A&M center. I have him at 39. You have him at 40. So close there, Carl. And then Jonathan Abram. I have him at 34, and you have him at 46. Any of these guys stand out to you?
We've talked about Debo Samuel quite a bit on here, so I'm going to talk about Eric McCoy a little bit. Again, I think a guy that's, athletically speaking, he tested off the charts, kind of climbed a little bit just because of his athleticism, I think. But I do think he is a very good fit with the Broncos and could be very much a target there in the second round. I really do think the Broncos could be looking pretty hard in that direction. From what I understand, barring a trade back in the first, it sounds like day 2 is when the Broncos are going to try to look for an offensive lineman, either second or third round. So Eric McCoy, that's a name to kind of keep an eye on. I would, at least for me, I would say very good fit.
I'd worry a little bit about the lateral agility, but I think he's a good player, solid athlete, strong player, and you're going to get a good player for 10 years. That's what you want. So he might not even be there at 41. We'll see. For me, the guy I want to talk about is Jonathan Abram. I have him much higher than you do. I have him at 34 overall. He flies around the field. He tested pretty darn well at this combine as well. And again, you're talking about a culture guy. This dude, he'd probably play with no feet or no legs if he could. There's somebody who absolutely just breathes football. I remember watching him against Iowa in the bowl game, coming downhill, just making big, huge hits. And there's something to be said about tone setters like that. Not always the best ball skills, not always the best in coverage, but I think the athleticism there, especially the ability to come down. And if you're looking for versatility in that back end, kind of like what we saw what the Patriots do with this Super Bowl run, I think he's that Patrick Chung kind of mold. That really strong guy, kind of a dimebacker, strong safety, free safety, or dimebacker, strong safety, linebacker type, where really just a tone setter and a culture guy. So I think I'm much higher on him than you are. And I don't love him playing that split cover 2 zone deep, but coming downhill, being physical, making people fully aware that if you throw the ball over the middle and he's around, he's going to hurt your wide receiver. Yeah, that's something that I can value. I don't want him to hurt players out there. I'm not calling for, to kill players, but if you're going to throw it out there, he's going to hit them. So I like that a lot.
Good list. Yeah. Well, our next group here, we have Amani Oruwariye.
Yeah.
Oruwariye. Okay. Chase Winovich, Rock Ya-Sin, and Mac Wilson, and then Darnell Savage, and finally for 45, Josh Jacobs. And this is where I'd say our group that we have the most difference in rankings. This is, where you're getting a little bit crazier on some of this stuff. But, starting off here, we actually had Mac Wilson the same.
Yeah.
Which is, that's understandable. I think he's fallen a little bit more than maybe some people should have. Just we are the slave to the most recent. And, of course, we remember the playoffs where he was just absolutely terrible. But, I guess for me, a player I really, really like that you're obviously not as high on, Chase Winovich. It's not that he's a great athlete. It's not that he is a perfect fit or anything like that. I guess for me, it's just he's one of those players when you watch, he's just always making plays. And he's just one of those guys. He just looks like you were talking about Jonathan Abram wanting to play with his legs cut off. Chase Winovich is the same kind of guy for me. He just loves football, and I think he was more the heart of that defense. I mean, there's other players on that Michigan defense that are better athletes and better football players, but Chase Winovich is just that guy that he just lives and breathes football. And so while, again, he's not that great fit for the Broncos, I still love the player, and I think whoever gets him is going to be really happy with what he brings to their team.
Again, that has more to do with his versatility to play some coverage as well as rush the passer and fit with the Broncos. So that's the big difference there for me. The guy that I'm surprised you're so low on, maybe I'm just higher in the safety class in general, but Darnell Savage. Yeah, I have him at 37. You have him at 53. And I love his game, man. I know he's a little bit small, but he's discount Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but maybe even a little bit better athlete. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if somebody took him in the first round. I think he's got a chance to play nickelback safety, and he brings it. So he's a really fun player that I like a lot. Oh,
I like him. I am a little bit lower on the safety class, obviously, than you are. I had a lot of them ranked lower than you. There's some games where I watched where I saw him out of position, I guess.
Yeah.
Or he'd bite on the play action, and then he'd get beat over the top. And some of that was his cornerbacks too, where they just did not do very good in coverage, and they depended on him too much. But that makes me nervous then coming to the NFL, because teams are going to try to do that a lot to him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a big fan, and you have Josh Jacobs 34. I'm at 58. That's probably the difference of the Broncos board of the overall big board.
Right.
But rounding it out now, Zach Allen 46. I have him at 38. You had him at 56. Defensive lineman from Boston College. JJ Arcega-Whiteside 47 overall. You had him at 51. I have him at 46. Charles Omenihu just cracked in here. I'm actually surprised he made it. 35 for you, so very high for you. 62 for me for the Broncos. Kelvin Harmon, 38 for you, 49 for you, wide receiver from North Carolina State. And then finally, 50th overall, we have Paris Campbell. You had him at 59. I had him at 41.
Let me talk here. My player I want to talk about is Paris Campbell.
Okay.
The reason I want to talk about him is because I worry he's a little bit of – he's got all this speed. He's got all this athleticism. But very rarely did you ever see on tape him use that other than when he was doing those quick slants or those quick in routes. And part of that's just scheme. I understand that. But it's hard for me if I'm trying to talk about a guy that maybe you have him at 41, so that'd be our second round pick. And when I haven't seen it actually on tape, it makes me nervous. Can he actually do it? Because he doesn't have the greatest hands. I've seen him make lots of drops. He wasn't really that deep threat that they really relied on. There's other guys like Terry McLaurin that they had being more of that deep threat kind of guy. And I just worry he's going to be more of that kind of crosser guy that you're going to have to try to figure out how to get him open on a lot of those kind of routes until he can develop his route tree. So that's my reason of having him a little bit lower than some of these other wide receivers that I feel like I've seen a lot more on tape of what they can do. Doesn't mean Paris Campbell can't do them. It's just I haven't seen it. And, I mean, he has a chance to really skyrocket up. I think, again, with that athletic profile that he has, he could become a great receiver in this draft. But when I haven't seen it, it's just hard for me to get behind it.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely banking on athletic upside and usage from not only, up the seam, from the slot, yak ability, everything, and special teams as well. So I just looking for some explosiveness in this offense. They need speed. They need playmakers in the worst way. Right now, the only true playmaker I would say as far as after the catch ability or open field ability is probably just Phillip Lindsay. I mean, honestly, it's probably just Phillip Lindsay. So
right.
That's the reason I'd be into him. But, there's definitely some projection there. But, who was it? Curtis Samuel went, I think, probably right around here 2 years ago. And I think Paris Campbell's a better player than him, higher upside player than him. So there's definitely some concerns there. But when you have that athletic trait card of him and that yak ability that he has, man, I wouldn't mind him in the second round. Probably not the direction I'd want to go, but you need to have some weapons on this offense around him. Diversify your weapon portfolio. We're talking a little economy here, and he's somebody that's totally different than anything they have. So that's the reason I'm higher on him than you are, and the reason I'm lower on Kelvin Harmon. Talking about he's a worse version of Cortland Sutton. He's that X receiver who's, you got to throw it up to him in that way. He's not going to run away from guys and in any way. So it's just too redundant to me to Cortland Sutton.
I want to hear your thoughts on why you have Zach Allen at 38.
I like him as a 5 technique. I think he's got a little bit of inside out. I mean, if you can project Rashawn Gary as a heavy edge or kicking him inside to 5 technique, that's where I have Zach Allen as well. He's a really smart player. I think you're getting a very, very high floor, one of the most batted balls, and he's got heavy hands. You know, he wins in a multitude of ways. He's not a bendy dude, but you're looking to move him more inside going forward. So I like him a lot, and specifically as a 5 technique running inside. You know, put Von Miller on his outside shoulder, put a nose tackle next to him, and go hunt.
Okay. I just was wondering. I'm not as high on him as a lot of people in Broncos country. I mean, I've seen, we had our friend Scott, who in a different mock draft, I saw him take Zach Allen in the 2nd round for the Broncos. And I just sat there and said, he's not a 2nd round pick for me. But I mean, I can get on board with it because, I mean, if we're moving him more to that 5 tech, then relying on him as an edge rusher, I mean, I can understand that a lot more, but it just, there's other guys I would rather have than him.
Yeah, for me, I mean, he looks like a defensive tackle to me. I mean, that's specifically for a 5 technique. You know, the weight isn't great, but he's very similar to Kingsley Keke, and he has one thing that makes me think that he's a great fit for that is that his arm length is 34 3/4, 92nd percentile for defensive tackles. So length is never going to be an issue with him. You know, not at all. I think he can probably get up to 290. Right now he's 281 at the combine. I think he can get bigger. And then his athleticism was all pretty darn good. And, you know, 73rd percentile, 40-yard jump, vertical jump, 80th percentile, broad jump, 87th percentile. And then his agilities, 83rd percentile, 3-cone, 92nd percentile, 20-yard shuttle. So you put that all together, this guy looks like a true 5 technique in a 1-gap scheme. So that's why I'm higher on him. And if the Broncos took him at 41, I'd have no issue with it because I think he projects very well as a 5 technique going forward with a very, very, very high floor.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right. Well, as always, we went a little long, but hey, it's draft season. We got to get these in while we can. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you guys very soon. We're planning on doing an instant reaction podcast following Thursday's selection, so hopefully that'll be up Friday for your commute to work when you guys are scouring, looking for players to talk about and what happened with the Broncos and what's going to happen with day 2. But until then, we'll see you guys soon. Go Broncos and go draft.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.